All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We'll just give one moment just to let a few more people to join. We know we have a number of people excited for today's uh, conversation, so just give us one moment, and we'll let a few more people join in, and we will get started. Thank you. Awesome. Lots of people joining in. Fantastic. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get us started today. Thank you very much for attending today. Um, as you're aware, this is the Future-Proofing Energy and Infrastructure Projects 2026 Trends and Innovations webinar. 2026 is nearly upon us, so the goal for today is to take a moment and have a discussion on 2026 trends and innovations for the energy, utilities, renewables, and digital infrastructure sectors. We all know that AI, artificial intelligence, and data centers get the most attention lately, but what else should we be focused on, and how do we contend with the more immediate needs? So we put together a great panel of four very experienced, knowledgeable leaders for this discussion today. I'll introduce them as we dive into the conversation. Please feel free to use the Q&A to submit any questions you have. We will answer questions toward the end of this webinar. Should we run short on time and not get to your question, I will be sure to follow up with a response after the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and we will provide the link to the recording later today. So again, thank you all for joining. My name is JJ Walter, and I am a Senior Client Success Specialist here at Pivvot. I have a geospatial GIS background with a wealth of experience in data acquisition, location analytics, spatial analysis, and customer success. I am honored to moderate this discussion today. So one thing before we dive in, Pivvot and Terracon believe strongly in workplace and employee safety. We begin all meetings with an IIF moment. So that's incident and injury-free moments, where someone provides a tip for general safety, ranging from protecting yourself on a construction site to daily life. You may notice that the bandage on the side of my face, my IF moment for today is a reminder to visit your dermatologist once a year for regular checkups and to highlight any skin conditions that may cause you concern. Just always good to be aware and to catch any situations early. I'm happy that I did, and other than this bandage, everything is good. So thank you very much. So with that, let's go ahead and get started today. So last week, Time Magazine unveiled its 2025 Person of the Year. It went to a group dubbed Architects of AI, recognizing how AI is influencing our lives for better or for worse, both professionally and personally. In the past 2 years, companies have raced to build and deploy new products with AI, oftentimes without much thought on why it's there and what the experience should be. So this fragmented AI is kind of using a little bit of AI in each of the tools that you use, has created negative perceptions and incomplete understandings around the value AI can bring to data and software. So Jason, I'm going to turn to you first. You've been with Terracon for 21 years and are now the Chief Technology Officer. What value do you see from AI in the data and technology that Terracon and Pivvot build and utilize to deliver what our customers and clients need?
Well, thank you, JJ. And I'll say that I agree with the assertions that were made with Time Magazine. We often fall into this, technology for technology's sake trap. And it's really important to remain rooted, in business fundamentals to be successful. And AI is no different than any other new shiny object that, technology that appears in the marketplace. with the exception of the overall speed is always increasing. And so from a background perspective, to be successful leveraging something like AI and Rathan and John and Justin will likely back me up in this. Understanding the problem that you're trying to solve, understanding what data and information you need to solve that, and then understanding how that fits into a business process are fundamental to being successful with AI. And that's true of any technology solution. It's not technology is never a singular answer, at least in my book. And so, looking at AI, understanding where your market competitors are, where your clients want to be, really informs you of how to stay ahead of your competition and to really provide value to your customer. So, with that as a background, Terracon and Pivot, we look at hundreds of AI use cases that Rathan can attest to, and we look at it through a couple of lenses. One is how feasible is this, from a data and technology perspective, and then the second one is the value that it delivers, or that we perceive that it's going to deliver. And with the speed of AI, some of that can be softer numbers. It isn't hard numbers all the time, but you need to look at both aspects of that. And you also need to consider the scope of what you're doing with AI so that you're not trying to boil the ocean, but instead you're getting it down to a singular problem with a well-defined and curated set of data and a well-defined step in a business process, or maybe a couple of steps that you're really trying to leverage. And so, with that, you look at what you can do for your clients and what you can position for your clients, and that may have top line value and new revenue streams. Or, and I think many companies that are engaging with AI today are looking at efficiencies and opportunities to eliminate things like non-value added tasks, synthesizing, summarizing, doing a lot of those things that eat up that time that our professionals would love to use to spend more with their clients, build a better relationship, understand what solutions we can put in front of them. So, there's those two aspects of AI that we're looking at to take advantage of, not only to differentiate us in the marketplace with our clients so that they know that we are technology forward and looking to leverage the data that we have for over 60 years of capturing data, that Terracon's been around, as well as applying technology to those solutions. And then from an employee perspective, really trying to help them be better consultants, eliminate those things that don't add value, automate those things that can, and then get them the information when they need it, where they need it.
So, it sounds like maintaining a balance between implementing the new into current processes and not losing sight of the key aspects that led to current business success is especially important. I imagine that is one of the things that can make your job so challenging, Rathan. So, Rathan, you were the newest member of the panelists to the Pivot Terracon team in the role of National Manager AI and Data Science. You've spent your career in data science. How are you integrating AI into Terracon, and what can others in the industry learn from this work?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that question, JJ. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I'm the newest. I joined Terracon about a year and a half ago now, and I come from a background. I have a PhD in AI. Worked in the semiconductor space for a few years. So coming in, the first thing that I started doing heavily was understanding the business, how Terracon, a little bit of Pivot over the last 6 months or so, getting to learn about the industry, how Terracon itself works. To what Jason said there, the business cases is what drives innovation. What like the shiny object syndrome is heavily involved at this, hype cycle, whatever you want to call it, with AI. So we had to create a strategic vision of AI being a business enabler, not just this tech savvy thing that we want to use. We prioritize use cases. So to the 100 odd use cases that I've come across in the last odd year is is plenty to do. Then looked at what's the business asking for? And that could be, it's like a top-down approach, business being in the forefront, be it client-facing or internal business use cases, and identifying what's the technical solution that can help us get there. While we are a small team and building that out, identifying the areas that we wanted to get involved in. Like I can remember a decade ago trying to explain AI, people needed definition and all kinds of information. Today, when you say AI, they say ChatGPT, right? So there's obviously a lot between that. It's not all ChatGPT, it's not all large language models, it's not all, oh, I don't know AI. Like people understand it. Now, how do you build that team around to technically enable to go solve problems that you can show results. So, and that's where people like Jason have enabled me to be able to create that results and look at business, connect with business, and and we've also collaborated with partnerships outside with, for example, companies like Microsoft who are leading this drive of AI, and they have built a lot of efficiency with tools like Copilot and whatnot. We've tried bringing that in. And the last piece I would add is the education component. So we educate people. We don't want to be that all-in-one group that does all AI. I've looked at and said, what are some of the pieces that I can educate some people and actually use AI? And softwares like or tools like Copilot have been useful in that sense, where it's easy to start integrating into bringing in daily efficiencies. We wanted I'll use a reference of low code or a no code, low code, pro code sort of a reference where the whole idea is if it's no code, it's something that anyone and everyone can use. So people get those tools in on their hands to be able to use it. Whereas low code is something that a decent programmer can actually implement things. They don't need to have an understanding or deep understanding of AI. And then the pro code is where we come in, my team and I come in, where we take the heavy-ended problems. That way we can move forward and we don't make technology a bottleneck, saying that, oh, we need to educate everything about AI, or this is just one team that's going to do everything AI. So that's what has been how we work together, obviously in partnership with the folks on this call, as well as the business leaders out there from our services standpoint. And we've made a great step forward and can't wait to for what 2026 brings us. Back to you.
Sounds like spending a lot of time both utilizing partners and really focusing on the needs. So not just taking AI and, going forward all in, but really being specific and strategic in kind of how you can implement it and how different people would be able to utilize that. No, that's very helpful. Thank you. So, John, I want to switch to you for a moment. You describe yourself as the data guy, which is a vast understatement. You've been working with data for decades and currently manage data architecture at Pivot. So, as we're talking about this, with so many companies racing to incorporate AI to kind of get that competitive edge, and with the knowledge that AI produces hallucinations that ultimately reduce consumer confidence, how do you ensure that data is trustworthy and ultimately defensible? Because it seems that data is still going to be a very important component as we move into this kind of AI world.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. Couple ways to attack that, but I think the most important one is data governance, which, echoing what Jason said about, keeping to the fundamentals. Data governance is nothing new, and it's not specific for AI, but it certainly AI just makes it that much more important, or using data in AI processes. AI is only as good as the data you feed it, and that data is only as good as the metadata, the governance surrounding it, the security surrounding it. So understanding where all your data and data sets come from, who they come from, how they were collected, at what resolution were they collected, and what they're describing, the age of them, when the data was collected, when it was aggregated, when it was published, any other context or assumptions about that data. That's all important to understand before using data for any workflow, AI or not. Aside from that, though, once you have used, a data sets, aggregated data sets in an AI process, transparency is super important. Whoever is using that product, it's important for them to know and understand that AI was used in that generation method. Um, and where the pieces of data came from that fed that answer. Going back to sort of what everyone's familiar with, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, things like that. Whenever I'm using that on my phone, and I'm making a decision based on information it gives, I always ask it to give the context. Where did that information come from? And it has a little link, and you go and read the article. So if there's a serious decision to be made, I always want to see the source data where that came from. AI makes it super quick to get that response in front of me, in front of my face, but I need to verify myself where it came from. So providing that link back to the source data sets, I think, is super important. And then the last thing that I think both Jason and Rathan had mentioned is, what problem are you trying to solve, right? It's not a one size fits all. We're not just typing, how do I do this? How do I do my job into ChatGPT, and it's giving us an answer. AI might not be the end all be all answer, but it can get you closer. It can help you scale those really big problems that a human, or even some traditionally automated processes are too big, or the data is too different to solve those problems. So it could get you 90% of the way through a workflow, and a human carries it over the finish line, right? And then there are the sort of AI specific things to think about, like good prompt engineering downstream, what questions you're asking, if you're using a large language model, and how you're asking those, as well as focusing on training data sets specific to the problem you are trying to solve. All data is not fit for every purpose, so having that keyed in, which requires an understanding of the problem before you start executing.
Thanks. So there's just so much going into it, and I really like the part where you said asking it to like give you the source and checking into the source. I imagine that is a step that many people, at least the daily user, is not going to think of. They're just kind of an assumption that, oh, if AI is telling it to me, it's probably accurate, it's probably true, and kind of that point of like that's ultimately then reduces trust when you start realizing, oh, that's not the case. So it sounds like understanding the source and being able to provide it, and kind of, as you said, think about it as you create these processes is going to be very important. So, oh,
Jump in just
yeah, go ahead.
on 2 points that John brought up that I think are important. One is the human in the loop component. We're not, as a society, all the way there with AI and trust, and understanding how it's actually arriving at the answers that it arrives at. And in some cases, that may be okay if you're asking it to, change the tone of an email, right? And change the wording. But when you're talking about financials, you're talking about medical diagnoses, you're talking about engineering decisions and recommendations, AI is not the solution. AI is helping to inform the solution if you're doing some of the things that John brought up, of verifying the sources and the source data, and those kind of things. We still need that human in the loop in many cases to ensure that we're getting the right outcome. And that's the other part that I think is, really challenging with the speed with which the world is going with AI is, um, just the reliance on the answer and not developing that critical thinking to look at that answer and challenge it.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Because I mean, as we, just to kind of expand on that, um, how do you overcome, and this could be for anybody on the panel, how do you overcome that? Keeping a human in the loop is going to be important, but also, we have such a range of personalities, knowledge base, things like that in our workforce from, people coming out now who maybe are using AI, ChatGPT every day to somebody who, it's this, I'll admit it. Like I generally use it for, emails and things like that. I'm definitely not using it to the full effect that I could. So what are some recommendations, suggestions on how do you overcome that within the workforce?
I'll take a first stab at that. And this is an analogy that I love is that treating AI like an intern. And right, the better instructions you give it, the better source material you give it to produce its work, the better the result it's going to give you. The more defined instructions and steps, the better it's going to be. And the more you work with that intern, the more that intern understands your style and what you're looking for and where those things are. So it learns as you go. So treating if whether you're new to AI or you use AI all the time, treating it like an intern, giving it really well-formed prompts, pointing it to well-curated data that you trust to get those results and let it do the work for you, that helps move everything forward.
Yeah, and I'll add
Working
on to
on,
that.
I was going to say, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like an intern, or anyone you're explaining a problem to, as long as you go into the problem with, your critical thinking turned on, writing your first prompt and getting a response back that makes no sense can sometimes make you reflect on the question you're asking and what assumptions you're making or glossing over that you either need to be more specific or maybe clarify, for yourself beforehand. So it AI does not make you not have to think. It just allows you to think differently and not have to think about the simple repeatable things. But sort of that critical thinking is not going to go away.
And quick point on that is it can consume a lot of data, and that's where AI is really helpful is the amount of content in one shot you're able to get access to, and then to everything Jason and John said there, you can dial down on what's important and what's not. So you can prioritize, and that's where that critical thinking helps you. Is you consumed all this data, can I look at okay, what's important? Now I have narrowed down myself. This is what I'm going to spend my time understanding what I need to do for the task I'm assigned. So to that intern reference, that's where we've all leveraged at some level our interns throughout our career is to be able to do things that are important, but we just can't figure out the time to do right now. So we just go, hey, can you do this background work? We have to analyze and we have to identify what's important before we communicate out because we are responsible for it. So at the end of the day, AI is not gonna, you can't point at AI or Copilot or anything and say, hey, it created that result, even with the source. We have to do our due diligence in understanding what came out of it and back that up to say, I believe that response is correct because I evaluated it, I looked at it and it said it made sense to my critical thinking.
think I think this incorporates a lot of the work that you're doing, Justin. For everybody, all participants, so Justin is the director of software engineering at Pivot, and I know Justin, you've had a career working as a geospatial engineer, thinking about data. but especially the delivery platforms to simplify analyses for users, to make quicker and better informed decisions. So as we incorporate this, I know that you're working on kind of those delivery platforms, um, and how to help. So we know the future is going to require access to data in a way that's easy and frictionless. And we and our customers need access to a lot of that holistically so we can make decisions quicker. Um, so in this current age of volumes of disparate data readily available, how do you see AI impacting the ability to sort through that noise and get to the story as it relates to our business partners and industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. From a pivot perspective, there's a common theme that we see across all the industries that we serve, and that is there's a need for easy access to data that you trust, right? That concept has been brought up a number of times in this forum so far. But I point that out and that it's important to continue to come back to the fundamental need that we're solving, right? And there's a place where AI can augment that or complement that workflow, but as an industry, we need to keep an eye on the fundamental need of our users and how we're solving that. As we look at the delivery platforms and how AI is starting to take shape, when I look out there, it looks to me that industries that are not, those of us that are not Anthropic or Microsoft or OpenAI, we're still in the early adoption phase or leaving the early adoption phase. That's important to know as we roll more of this technology out. And as we look back at that phase of the adoption cycle, we're starting to see some telling metrics. And just to throw a couple of them out there, 70 to 90% of AI pilots do not scale to production levels, right? And 50% are dropped before they even hit production. They fail, right? And I'm not throwing those out there to say this is all hype or it's failing, but to really highlight that I believe the next iteration of what we're going to see is going to look very different than how we're all experiencing AI today in software-focused solutions, right? And that gets back to the comment you made earlier around fractured AI. We have a little bit over here and a little bit over there. What it's really doing right now in its current state is contributing to siloed data. And as we start to implement more, we're going to see our industry and the technology leaders moving to a more measured, pragmatic approach to implementing AI, right? That's going to lead to what I think are three main things. And one is AI-ready data, getting that data out of the silos and getting it into a format that folks can, if we go back to that fundamental need, access easily and trust. I think it's going to require some intelligence delivered alongside those data. And that goes back to the metrics that I threw out a minute ago. A response to those early pilots is going to be a large emphasis, a large focus on, all right, what are we really doing? What is the scope? What is the schedule, right? And we're going to have to look at ways to gain efficiencies in building out these solutions and doing it in an iterative way. So we're showing value and incorporating feedback as we go down that road. And then the last item there is, and I'll say it again, the why, right? That is a big thing. AI is a shiny object. It's been interesting to watch because a lot of the previously hyped up software was a little bit more removed where, once ChatGPT went live, everybody could touch it, go in there, ask it questions and get results back and realize that this looks reasonable, right? And so the fact that people were able to use it, I think it lowered some guard, and there's a lot of shiny objects that were chased. And so hopefully as an industry, we're going to focus more on the why and provide solutions that are more focused towards a user. I feel like there's probably a lot of users out there who feel like AI implementations or solutions are being forced upon them. And so moving that to more of the why are we doing this? What are we trying to solve? Ultimately, I think if we go back to your fundamental question of how do I see AI impacting the delivery platforms and the solutions that we're providing, we're really in a spot right now where AI is forcing us to rethink how we're integrating systems. and it's outgrowing those patterns that we've used for many years. And the organizations that really lean into understanding how to integrate both internal business data and external data and provide that in an easy to access format to their users, to their employees. I believe those are going to be the real winners when we get to a more level playing field as the technology starts to take shape.
Yeah.
Rathan, did you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, something to add to that too. I think Justin covered it beautifully there. Talked about ChatGPT. I think what that changed is given that people have access to a tool where they can interact with data, where it probably will evolve is they expect to be able to interact with the data everywhere, right? Like we want, I'm quite sure, Justin, you probably get asked, like all of us, hey, can you throw a chat bot in this where I can play and interact with the data? While that expectation is well set in the sense that, oh, you have ChatGPT and it's trained on all this data, and people expect that, oh, if I throw in my data into ChatGPT, it's going to give me a response, and that's right. Whereas what's Pivot or any other Terracon-based platform or product, what's so special about it is the data, right? It's the data that we use to build that models that drive the decisions that it makes. So all if I break it down, is there is the predictive part of it, there is the generative part of it, and the agentic part of it when you look at AI. And you're just looking at the agentic side and forgetting the predictive and the generative part to validate that is it giving the right response or the wrong response. And that's where people who are smart building those predictive models and the generative models play a big role so that the agentic side does not hallucinate or make up stuff. And that's where we play a big role in making sure that as we build this system out our clients' expectations of having an interactive system and whatnot, we back it up with the right models and the right data to what John said about the data governance piece and everything. It's all building blocks. Data is the bottom layer. If the foundation is not right, everything you build on top of it is going to fall through and it's going to have cracks in it. And somebody's going to find that crack, and that's not going to look nice on us, right? And us, the people on this call, that's what we focus on, making sure that that foundation is right and everything we build on top of as well. So.
Now, does that
I'm going to
include security too? Because as you're talking, I'm thinking in terms of like all the different data. I mean, a lot of different data sets are important, but for all the many companies, a lot of that data is proprietary. It is unique. I know Terracon has a lot of proprietary data. So how are we allowing AI to get into there, but making sure that tools can be used, but keeping everything safe and secure so that we're not just handing over results to others or information to others? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that goes back to the governance and security piece. We're not just throwing all data, our data, the web's data, client's data, everything. We're not just throwing it into one big pot, mixing it around, and seeing what comes out the other side. There are there have to be dedicated processes, plans, a problem that you're trying to solve, and those data sets governed and models only pointed at things appropriately and not passed back and forth between models, without our planning, without our understanding, without our governance. So there's a great deal of planning and architecting set up on the front end of that.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on, what Rathan was saying, and John said it pretty well. Most companies cannot keep up with the tech giants that are going to be able to iterate and aggregate all this publicly available data to make these LLMs and AI solutions. They need to find their place where they have unique or proprietary data that can inform those models and inform those outcomes to the benefit of their clients and their employees. And do that, as John mentioned, in a secure way that is not throwing that proprietary data out into the public realm, and human in the loop, reviewing it. And to be very specific for Terracon and Pivot, Terracon's been drilling holes in the ground since the 60s. We've probably drilled more holes in the ground than anybody else. So besides all the publicly available data that you can go and get that describes the ground, we have empirical data that has been engineering reviewed that we can use to inform the models that we create, to inform the recommendations and solutions we provide to our customers. And so that is a differentiator. A Google may have access to a ton of data. They do not have access to a lot of the empirical data we have, nor do they have hundreds or thousands of engineers on staff that are geotechnical engineers, environmental engineers, materials, engineers. And so those are the spaces that most companies will need to find to be able to differentiate, in the industry leveraging AI.
And I want to jump in real quick and riff on
Yeah.
something Rathan said and Jason's comments there, which is really, once you find that spot, a term that I've run across is explainable AI. And I hope that we all start to say that more, right? Insofar as you give easy access to data and you give some answers. But if somebody asks why enough, you should be able to answer the why and how you got there, right? So that's an important component as you talk about the differentiation data that businesses are adding, not just cramming it in there and making it work, but making sure that it's auditable insofar as if somebody asks deep questions, us as humans and practitioners don't have the ability to say, oh, sorry, I was just hallucinating, right? It's wrong if it's wrong. So we need to be able to trace back how we got there, even if it takes some effort to get back there. That's an important component of all of this.
And is that similar to how you would think? So we have a question that came in terms of, so as people are using AI, they might just take the response verbatim and kind of pass it along. And so the question is, how do you recommend, how do you suggest to personnel to like, hey, make sure you're fact checking this. Like, don't just take that shortcut. But let's make sure that we're providing defensible statements and we're linking back. So is that what you would recommend, Justin? That kind of thing? And Jason's, you all like that type of work to make sure that happens, or what are your suggestions?
I think it goes back to something that Rathan said, which is around literacy, AI literacy. And, we often look to use a system or a technology to solve a people problem. And if it's a behavior where somebody is not using critical thinking, or they're just taking the output of something that they don't even verify the source material and passing it along, that is a people problem. That is, the technology is doing what the technology is doing. Now, you have to have your checks and balances in place from a security perspective, a bias perspective, all of those things. But it really comes down to a comprehensive partnership with whatever structure you have within your organization to educate on the appropriate use and handling of not only the data, but the outcomes that AI produces and what those expectations are. I think in the engineering space, with engineers that are professionally licensed and, keeping the safety of the community and people first and foremost, I think that's an easier discussion to have internally, and it may be different in different industries, but it really is around the education of the individuals using it in a professional capacity and understanding, the appropriateness of what they're, putting their hands on.
I would compare it to the closest analog I can think of is security from a development perspective, in that the best security program is a culture of security. And I would say the same as I heard, hints of that in Jason's comments there, of it there's also a cultural aspect of it, of having a mindset that's open to using new technology, but also being skeptical of it and challenging it, to make sure that if something's wrong, not just realizing it's wrong, but saying, how can we make sure it's not wrong the next time, right? And that, from a business perspective, leads back to the culture that's being put in place for more of the innovative work that's being done within the business.
That's great. I appreciate that. And as a reminder to participants, feel free to use that Q&A to submit questions. Again, happy to add your questions to the discussion. With that, we did get a question I want to get into. So the question basically is that everybody wants a data warehouse where you can store intelligent data. But a roadblock to that is there's no bridge between data and applications unless it's forced into a specific platform, database, programming language. The need is for a data agnostic store of data. If AI is going to be successful, to kind of be able to read it so that you can feed data into Excel, CAD, GIS tools, ERP systems, custom applications. So what are your thoughts on how to make data so that it is more data agnostic and can be used in numerous applications, as opposed to so much of data which might have been geared for one platform or one specific task over others?
So I'll start before John answers it technically, which I will say I think the technical solution is actually much more straightforward than the cultural solution. The curation of data is where a lot of the heavy lifting has to happen within an organization. If you're trying to train a model, let's just say on responding to or creating a proposal for work that you're going to submit to your customer, and you want to train it on proposals that won work in the past, right? Good proposals that put your services in the appropriate light, that are within context of what that client is asking for. And the work that needs to be done is finding those elements that can train that model to do that. Not in the let's connect it up and put it in a data store or a warehouse or a blob store, whatever you want to, John will talk more about that, but curating good data and going through the effort of doing that, right, often trips up companies because it's work. Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, and I think my answer is probably a lot closer to yours than you might have initially thought of. I keep saying data governance, but that really is the answer. Having a data governance program in place, and it sounds like a technical thing. It absolutely is a cultural thing. Having that literacy, that understanding of what's important across the org is key. So you let's say you manage the task of putting all your data in a warehouse, whatever that may be. I'm not going to tell you how to build those bridges, but the data governance is the map, that you can use to navigate to build those bridges, or see where those bridges might be beneficial, where you need to connect to a process to a data, whether that's going in or out or both. But yeah, having that map, knowing where each piece of data came from, where it's going, the lineage associated with that, and all the context, that's crucial. So it's not just throwing a bunch of stuff in a box and expecting people to do something magical with it.
And a quick point from an AI standpoint is, as you've probably seen the recent, and when I say recent, everything last week was recent. You've seen multimodal AI. Now models and applications have become agnostic to the type of data. So you can literally feed in different kinds of data to the same model. And part of it is, without going too technical, it's the vectorizing part of it. So you're embedding every data point in, doesn't matter, text, image, voice, video, whatever that looks like, you're able to embed it and train single models. So now, to everything that Jason and John said there, you document the data, you have to create that systems to collect data and create that map. Now that you know where your data sets are, you're able to connect, okay, these are, you built that relationship using that map. You can feed different kinds of data into the same model. So it doesn't matter where that data came from or what type of that data is, you're still able to build intelligent application. And that's where you'll see a lot more applications around it, where the data source, it's agnostic to the data type itself.
Yeah, and just the additional pieces to John's comment, having a data element like 98% doesn't tell you a whole lot and won't tell an AI model a whole lot, but saying it's 98% compacted soil, it's this type of soil, it was captured using this device, these were the weather conditions, this was a prior measurement, all that metadata around it is what truly helps train and educate and provide that result that you get through AI. And all of that is, you have to think about your business process. You have to think about the data that's used and captured at each step of that, and then what each step needs as an input and an output. It's a lot of systems design thinking that organizations have to go through to truly leverage AI as a solution differentiator.
I will say, plugging AI back into my answer, if you find yourself with a large warehouse that has been assembled haphazardly and not properly governed, a lot of the data governance tools out there do have AI components that'll help scan and provide definitions and that context. Now, it still has to be validated. You're not getting the human out of the loop. But it can reduce a lot of that brain damage, that mental overhead of just looking at 50 databases with 100,000 tables and saying write definitions for all of these. It can help you start to climb that mountain in a way that's much quicker and wasn't previously possible.
I'm curious then, kind of looking forward, are there any recommended technologies, software, hardware that you think are going to be more impactful for people to use, or how do you just see AI and kind of data impacting that innovation and user experience? Like what are some potential recommendations for moving forward in the next year or two that I think people will need to focus on?
I'll come at it from two aspects, and going back to the frictionless, some of the things that Justin brought up. I think AI is going to challenge the interfaces of the systems that we use. You're not clicking on buttons and going into boxes and generating PDF reports or Excel files. You are interrogating the data, and your interfaces will need to change so that you can interrogate that data and ask the question. In many ways, I think like dashboards are going to go away, because dashboards are typically a collection of things that somebody believes are the most critical things that in general people need to see, or very specific people need to see. But what if that interface is just a blank slate and you interrogate the data and then it produces it to you to answer your question, right? So anytime anybody has went to a dashboard or run a report, they have a very specific question they're likely trying to answer. Well, if you can just directly ask that question and have it provide you something that's either visual or tabular or a bunch of data, that is much more powerful and much faster for you to arrive at your solution. So I think just from the way we interact with systems is fundamentally going to change. And you see it now with, you talk to your phone, you ask Alexa, you ask Siri, you ask, you're doing that differently than, pecking away at your phone with your big thumbs and trying to, get to a solution. our systems are a little bit behind that in most organizations. And so AI is going to challenge in that way. And then all of that, so that's the first part. And then the second part is going back to what data is important to answer all of those questions, whether it's the questions that your clients are asking or it's questions that your employees are asking to provide value to their clients. You need to really get your hands around that data and how you can help synthesize, summarize, and orchestrate that data into your systems. And technologies like AI make that happen much easier and much faster if you have the appropriate governance, the appropriate security, the appropriate education and literacy across your organization to do that. So it's a fundamental shift.
It's been interesting to watch. It's such a big shift in the way that you interact with AI, and that move away from more of a focused user interface experience. So it's been really interesting to see that. I do see the other interesting piece of the way that we interact with AI right now is that I would bet a lot of times you interact with it and then you take the outputs that you want, you cherry pick it, and you take it somewhere else, right? So coming up with a way where that data lands where it needs to land for your next step in the process, I think that's going to be a challenge that organizations are going to have to tackle, and that goes to, how is it going to impact how organizations are implementing technology? It's going to move to a need of a more of a strategy based approach, where previously it was kind of aligned and you could be more iterative. I think there needs to be a bigger picture, at a high level that drives the innovation, but also gets a little bit more granular so that those teams can be directed. But it's a pretty big change in the way that technology is approached.
Something to add from an innovation standpoint, we're able to innovate faster because we have more data in our hands. And when I say data, I'm talking about information that's out there that can equip us in trying new things and innovate faster from a developer standpoint. If I'm coding, I have collaborators, digital collaborators like Copilot or tools that is going to help. Like I can go tell, hey, go do this, go build that. So I can things that would have taken me a week, I'm able to enable and go do it in a day. And that means I can iteratively again try different things and improve on it with faster out of the door, get things out of the door much faster so that the clients are happier, we are happier, we are able to take on more projects so that affects both the bottom line and the top line in terms of what we are trying to hit.
An army of interns, right?
Right. Yes.
Well, this is great. And I'm thinking too, is there any, and you may not have anything off the top of your heads, is there any pitfalls or anything in the coming years that you might recommend people try to avoid, or whether it's too much reliance or anything along that? Is there something that, you've all learned that, say, as we move forward in innovation and moving forward in this area, like, don't do this or watch out for this? Is there anything along those lines?
I think we hit on it early, and I don't think it changes. As AI becomes more capable, we're going to think that it can solve bigger problems right out of the gate. And you're going to run into some of those statistics that Justin brought up around AI, programs or initiatives failing because you're trying to do too much too fast and you're not, orchestrating and building. And I think Rathan said it, they're like building blocks. And so think about your building blocks to your solution and how do you get there? I think that AI is going to become more ubiquitous and it's going to become more available, and people are going to continue to have that, tendency to start too big and too broad and not focus on the building blocks and the orchestration of those building blocks. Some of the best AI solutions that we probably interact with on a day-to-day basis, if you were to pull back the covers It's probably an orchestration of dozens of AI agents and multiple LLMs all working together really well in a really well orchestrated fashion. And it isn't just this one thing that somebody developed with this great idea. It's a collection of those things that built on each other to deliver an ultimate goal. We're gonna, as it gets easier to do these things, we're still gonna be doing those same bad habits that we did when we started.
I would say don't come into it with I have a problem and I have no idea how I'm going to solve it. AI is the answer. Come into it with I have a problem and I know exactly how to solve it, but it would literally take me 1,000 years to solve it. Point AI at that problem.
Yeah, and AI is a great starting point for to what John said there in terms of where do I start? Is this something that when you have 10 different things that you're trying to approach or 10 different approaches for one problem, you want to kind of identify it and have some information behind it that backs those decisions. A lot of times you can use that because to my first point I made, it's able to consume a lot of data and simplify it. I was talking to somebody within Terracon yesterday about how much data sources they're able to point at and use different sort of models and find that be it the Geminis, the Anthropic, the Perplexity, and the GPT models, they all work differently. They have their own strengths and weaknesses. Don't think there is one stop shop, right? Like a cookie cutter approach for everything. GPT is going to have answers for everything. It's evolving, right? And just like how we upgrade our phones, computers, there are programs that don't run on our computers if you have old computers. Same way, there are models that are going to be better, faster, and being educated and knowing that and that literacy piece is important. So you know what's the right tool for your problem at that time that you're working with. And again, like what I said, last week is already too old. There's something that's new out there today that we need to educate ourselves, and that's how fast AI is evolving.
Yeah, and you may not need to have all those answers yourselves, but you need somebody like Rathan, right, available to you to help you with that.
So many more questions. But basically, we've come to the end of time for this webinar. Anybody has any questions, just know that we're going to follow up afterwards. So I'll send you all email. You get a link to this recording. If you have any additional questions that we weren't able to get to, if you want to have additional conversations in terms of strategizing workflows or thoughts or anything like that, please respond, ask, and we can continue this conversation. I want to say thank you very much to our panelists. I know your schedules are super busy this time of year, and I really appreciate you joining for this conversation. Thank you to all the participants. Hope this was of great value. And again, we will absolutely like to continue this conversation. So please feel free to reach out. With that said, happy holidays. Be safe. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Thank you, JJ.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, JJ. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.